The moment cracked the air before anyone had time to breathe. "Get him out of my row!" The words didn't float. They didn't ask. They landed hard, sharp, like something thrown with intent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Laughter snapped shut. Even the low hum of the plane seemed to pull back, as if the aircraft itself wanted no part of what was unfolding. Heads turned all at once. Not curious at first, instinctive, human reflex. Trouble had announced itself and everyone felt it. The man who spoke stood in the aisle, tall, clean-cut, expensive from head to toe. His jacket looked like it had never seen a wrinkle. His watch caught the overhead light and threw it back in everyone's faces, flashing with quiet arrogance. He didn't look angry in the way poor people look angry. He looked offended, like the world had failed to arrange itself properly around him. His finger was raised, stiff, accusing, and it pointed straight at the black man seated by the window. The black man didn't flinch. He sat upright, shoulders relaxed, hands folded neatly in his lap. His boarding pass rested between his fingers, plain and visible, as if he had placed it there on purpose. Mid-30s maybe, calm eyes. The kind of face that had learned long ago when silence spoke louder than defense. "I didn't pay first-class prices to sit next to that," the rich man said, louder now. Louder than necessary. Loud enough to make sure everyone heard exactly what he meant. A few passengers sucked in breath. A woman 2 rows back shifted uncomfortably. Someone pretended to cough. Someone else stared very hard at the seatback screen like it might offer escape. The flight attendant froze. She had been reaching up to close an overhead bin. Her hand stopped mid-air. Slowly she turned. Her smile, the professional one she had practiced, didn't quite hold. "Sir," she began, but the words sounded thin, fragile. The engines hummed beneath the floor, steady and patient, like they were waiting to see what humans would do next. Outside the window, the airport glowed with soft lights. Ground crew moved below, small and distant, unaware that dignity was being weighed inside a metal tube above them. The black passenger didn't look at the man. He didn't look at the flight attendant either. He turned his head slightly toward the window and focused on the glass, on the reflection of his own face layered over the runway lights. He watched a baggage cart roll past, watched a worker in a neon vest pause to stretch his back. That silence, that calm, it poured gasoline on the fire. "You hear me?" the rich man snapped, leaning closer, his shadow falling over the seat. "Move him. Or I'm calling the airline president. I know people." The words "I know people" carried weight. They always did. They were meant to. They were the unspoken threat, the reminder of power that didn't need to explain itself. The flight attendant swallowed. You could see it. Her eyes darted, just for a second, toward the boarding door that was still open, toward the clock mounted near the galley, toward the growing line of eyes that had stopped pretending this wasn't happening. "This flight is already delayed," she said softly, too softly. "Please lower your voice." She was trying to buy time, trying to keep the peace, trying not to choose sides in a moment where choosing no side still meant choosing the wrong one. But power doesn't lower itself. It doesn't whisper. It doesn't step back just because someone asks nicely. The rich man smiled. It wasn't wide, it wasn't loud, it was small and cold and confident. The kind of smile that came from knowing rules bent when you leaned on them hard enough. "He doesn't belong here," he said. Clear, simple, final. And we both know it. The words settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket. No one moved, no one spoke. Silence became loud, almost unbearable. The black man's jaw tightened, just a fraction. A muscle in his cheek jumped, that was all. No anger, no protest, just the smallest sign that something had landed where it hurt. He had been here before. Not this exact seat, not this exact man, but this moment. The look, the assumption, the way his presence alone was treated like a mistake that needed correcting. He thought of his mother years ago squeezing his hand in a grocery store when someone followed them down every aisle. He thought of his first job, where a customer asked to speak to someone more qualified while he stood right there in uniform. He thought of all the times he had learned the cost of reacting. He stayed still. The flight attendant cleared her throat. "Sir," she said again, this time to the rich man, "everyone here has a valid ticket." "That doesn't mean they earned it," the man replied without missing a beat. A ripple moved through the cabin. Someone shook their head. Someone else crossed their arms tighter, like bracing against cold. The black passenger finally turned his head, just enough to meet the flight attendant's eyes. Not pleading, not demanding, just present. "I'm fine right here," he said quietly. His voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It was steady, measured, the voice of someone who knew himself well enough not to argue with strangers. That calm did not soothe the situation. It threatened it. The rich man scoffed. Unbelievable, he muttered, as if he were the victim now, as if he were the one being disrespected. The flight attendant hesitated. That hesitation was everything. It was the pause where systems decide who matters more, where policies become flexible, where dignity becomes negotiable. She glanced back toward the cockpit door, closed and silent. She glanced at her fellow crew member, who stood frozen a few steps away, eyes wide. She glanced again at the clock. Every second felt heavier than the last. "Sir," she said, choosing her words carefully, "let me see what I can do." The rich man nodded, satisfied. Victory in his mind was already sealed. The black man looked back out the window. The plane hadn't even left the ground yet. The wheels were still planted, the sky was still distant, and already a line had been drawn. Not between aisles, between worth and assumption. A child somewhere near the back laughed suddenly, unaware. The sound cut through the tension like a reminder that life kept moving even when people froze. The engines grew a little louder as the plane prepared for pushback. A low vibration traveled up through the seats, through the floor, through the bones of everyone inside. The rich man adjusted his jacket and checked his watch, impatience etched into his face. He had places to be, meetings to attend. He had paid for comfort, for control, for a world that obeyed him. He looked down at the black passenger one more time, eyes scanning him like an object that didn't fit the room. The black passenger remained still. Inside him, something old and familiar stirred. Not anger, not fear, awareness, the kind that comes from knowing exactly how fragile this moment was, how easily it could tip one way or another. He took a slow breath. In, out. He didn't know yet how this would end. He didn't know who would stand up or who would look away. He didn't know what. The next few minutes would cost him. Neither did anyone else. What no one could see, what no one in that cabin could possibly know, was that karma had already boarded the flight, quiet, patient, unassuming. And it wasn't seated by the window, it was standing in the aisle. The wheels left the ground, but the tension stayed right where it was. As the plane climbed, the air inside the cabin grew thicker, heavier, like something invisible was pressing down on every chest. The city lights dropped away beneath them, turning into scattered sparks, but no one was looking out the windows anymore. All eyes were pulled forward toward the quiet war unfolding in first class. The rich passenger pressed the call button again. Ding, a sharp, impatient sound. Not loud, but impossible to ignore. The flight attendant appeared almost immediately, her smile tighter now, more fragile than before. She leaned in slightly, voice low, practiced, "Yes, sir." He didn't look at her at first. His eyes stayed forward, chin lifted, like he was above the conversation even while controlling it. "My water is warm," he said, "and this seat is uncomfortable." She nodded quickly. "I'll bring you a fresh one." "And," he added, finally turning his head just enough to glance sideways, "I don't feel safe." That word again. Safe, secure. It dropped into the space between them like a loaded weapon. She blinked. "I'm sorry, sir. What do you mean?" He gestured vaguely, barely bothering to look. "He's making me uncomfortable." The black man didn't react. He sat still, hands folded again, eyes forward. His breathing was slow, controlled. The flight attendant followed the gesture, her eyes landing on him. She hesitated. Just for a moment. That moment said more than words ever could. "Sir," she said carefully, "he hasn't done anything. He has a valid ticket. There's no issue." The rich man's lips curled, just slightly. "There is an issue," he snapped. "People like him don't just end up here." The sentence wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It slid through the cabin, smooth and sharp, cutting deep. A woman across the aisle shifted in her seat, eyes darting away. She pulled her phone from her bag and stared down at the screen without really seeing it, thumb scrolling out of habit, out of avoidance. 2 rows back, a man adjusted his tie and nodded once, slow and silent, as if agreeing but unwilling to put his agreement into words. Silence followed, the worst kind, the kind that feels like permission. The black passenger swallowed. He felt the heat rise in his chest, that familiar mix of anger and exhaustion. He had felt it his whole life, in classrooms, in offices, in stores where clerks watched him too closely, in spaces where he was always asked without words to prove he belonged. He turned his head slightly, just enough to speak without raising his voice. "I paid for this seat," he said. Calm, clear, just like you. For a split second, something flickered in the rich man's eyes. Surprise, maybe. or annoyance that the silence had been broken. Then he laughed, not a laugh of humor, a laugh of dismissal, loud, cruel, designed to put someone back in their place. "That's cute," he said. The word hung there, dripping with condescension. He leaned closer, invading space without touching. His voice dropped low enough that it felt private, even though everyone could still hear. "You think money makes you equal?" he whispered. "Sit down and don't cause trouble." The black man held his gaze, not in challenge, not in submission, just steady. The plane jolted slightly, a soft shake that rattled the cups on tray tables. The seatbelt sign chimed, a polite warning that went mostly ignored. Somewhere toward the back, a baby cried. The sound echoed, thin and sharp, then faded as a parent soothed them. The flight attendant stood frozen again. She felt the weight of the moment pressing in on her from all sides. She knew this type. She had been trained for this type. The demanding ones, the powerful ones, the ones whose complaints could cost jobs. There was an unspoken rule in the airline industry. Everyone knew it. Keep the high-status passengers calm. Smooth things over, even if it meant bending fairness, even if it meant someone else paid the price. She glanced around, measuring the room, the eyes, the silence, the tension. She paused, hating herself for the pause. "I'll check if there's another seat available." The words landed like a quiet betrayal. The black passenger closed his eyes, not because he was giving up, not because he was broken, because he was holding himself together. Behind those closed lids were years of swallowed moments. Times he had spoken up and been labeled aggressive. Times he had stayed quiet and been labeled weak. Times he had learned that dignity often came at a cost, and silence was sometimes the only currency that didn't bankrupt you. He breathed in slowly, counted, breathed out. He reminded himself where he was. Thousands of feet in the air, no exits, no escape. Just this narrow space and the people inside it. The rich man leaned back, satisfied. He had won this round. He adjusted his seat, stretched his legs, reclaimed the space like a conqueror planting a flag. The flight attendant walked away, her steps quick, her shoulders tense. She told herself she was just doing her job. She told herself she would fix it quietly. She told herself she wasn't choosing sides. But the cabin felt different now. People shifted in their seats. Conversations that had started before takeoff never resumed. A heaviness settled in, the kind that comes when something wrong is allowed to stand. The black man opened his eyes again and stared straight ahead. He could feel eyes on him, but he refused to look back. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing his hurt. He thought about the irony of it all. First class, soft leather seats, free drinks, a place built on comfort and privilege. And yet, it was here, of all places, that he felt most exposed. The turbulence returned, light but steady. The plane rocked gently, like a reminder that no one was really in control. The rich man frowned. "Is this normal?" he asked loudly. The flight attendant returned with fresh water, placing it carefully on his tray. "Just a little rough air," she said. "Nothing to worry about," he scoffed. "I worry when I'm surrounded by uncertainty." His eyes flicked again toward the man beside him. The black passenger didn't move. Minutes passed. The seatbelt sign stayed on. The sky outside darkened as they climbed higher. The rich man pressed the call button again. Ding! "Yes, sir?" The flight attendant's voice was thinner now. "I want this addressed," he said. "I shouldn't have to tolerate this." She glanced at the black man, then back at the rich passenger. "Sir, there's no policy being violated. There should be," he replied flatly. That was when something subtle shifted. The black passenger straightened slightly, not aggressively, just enough to signal presence. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said, still calm. "I'm sitting in my seat." The rich man rolled his eyes. "You people always say that." The words landed hard. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the cabin. The flight attendant's face drained of color. "Sir," she warned quietly. But the damage was done. The black man felt something inside him settle. Not anger, not fear, clarity. He realized something in that moment. This wasn't about the seat. It never had been. It was about who was allowed to take up space without question. Who was assumed to belong. Who was seen as a problem just by existing. He closed his eyes again, just for a second. Patience, he reminded himself. Because injustice has a way of piling up. It stacks small moments into heavy ones, and pressure, especially at 30,000 feet, always reveals cracks. The plane steadied, but the air inside remained tense. The rich man leaned back, smug, convinced this story would end the way all his stories did. With him on top, what he didn't know, what no one in that cabin knew yet, was that the man he was trying to erase was not powerless. He was waiting, and patience, when pushed far enough, as a way of changing everything. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane leveled off. Conversation stayed muted. Eyes stayed watchful. The flight continued. But something was coming, and when it arrived, it would hit harder than turbulence. The captain's voice cut through the cabin like a blade through cloth. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated. It wasn't the words that scared people. It was the tone, calm on the surface, tight underneath. The kind of calm that meant someone was holding something together with both hands. The plane shuddered. Not a gentle shake this time, not the kind you shrug off with a smile and a joke about air pockets. This one rolled through the cabin like a wave, lifting stomachs, rattling teeth, snapping heads back against headrests. Fear dropped faster than altitude. Overhead bins creaked, cups trembled. Somewhere behind first class, a suitcase thumped hard enough to make people gasp. A child screamed sharp and sudden, the sound slicing through the tension. The rich passenger grabbed his armrest. Hard. All that confidence, all that control, gone in a breath. What is this? He barked, voice cracking just enough to give him away. Is this safe? What's going on? No one answered him right away. The plane rocked again, stronger this time, a violent jolt that sent a ripple of panic through the cabin. A woman prayed out loud, someone cursed. Someone laughed nervously, the sound breaking apart halfway through. The black man stayed still. His eyes were closed, not in fear but in focus, like someone listening for something deeper than noise, like someone measuring, calculating, remembering. A flight attendant broke into a fast walk down the aisle. Her face was pale now. The practiced calm had vanished completely. This wasn't customer service anymore. This was real. She stopped beside the black man's seat and leaned in close, her voice low and urgent, almost shaking. "Sir," she whispered, "are you still current?" His eyes opened, clear, sharp, present. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Always." The rich passenger turned toward them, confusion cutting through his fear. "Current what?" he demanded. No one answered him. The plane lurched again, harder than before. The floor seemed to drop out for a split second, that awful floating feeling that makes hearts slam into ribs. Overhead lights flickered. Luggage rattled like bones in a box. The captain's voice came back, no longer smooth. "We have a technical issue," he said. "Any licensed aviation engineer or pilot on board, please identify yourself immediately." The word immediately echoed through the cabin. Silence followed, not the heavy, judgmental silence from before. This one was different. Tight, expectant, fragile. People looked around, eyes wide, searching faces, searching uniforms, searching for anyone who could make this better. No one moved. The rich passenger swallowed hard. He looked suddenly very small in his seat, fingers clenched, jaw tight. Then came the click, the soft, unmistakable sound of a seatbelt being unbuckled. Heads turned. The black man stood. Not rushed, not dramatic, just steady. "I'm an aerospace systems engineer," he said, voice calm but firm. "Former Air Force. I helped design the model you're flying." For a moment, the words didn't land. Then they did. The cabin went completely still. No shaking, no whispering, no crying, just shock. The rich passenger stared at him, mouth open, then closed it, then opened it again like his brain couldn't decide what to do with this new reality. His eyes dropped to the man's hands, the same hands he had dismissed. The same hands that might now be the difference between landing safely and not landing at all. A flight attendant grabbed her radio, speaking fast, urgent. Another appeared, eyes wide, nodding as she listened. "Sir," the first attendant said, almost reverent now. "The captain would like to see you in the cockpit." The black man nodded once. No smile. No glance at the rich passenger. No need. He stepped into the aisle, moving past knees that pulled back quickly, respectfully now. People made room, real room, the kind that says, "You matter." As he walked forward, the plane shook again, but this time it felt different, less violent, like a warning instead of a threat. The cockpit door opened, closed, and then there was waiting. Minutes stretched. Seconds felt like minutes. Every sound became too loud, every vibration too sharp. People watched the closed cockpit door like it might start speaking on its own. The rich passenger sat frozen, hands clasped together now, his watch forgotten, his jacket wrinkled. He stared at the empty seat beside him, the seat he had tried to erase someone from, the seat that now felt heavier than any burden he had ever carried. Another jolt ran through the plane. A gasp rippled through the cabin. Then, steadiness. Not perfect, not smooth, but controlled. The shaking eased. The lights stopped flickering. The air seemed to loosen its grip on everyone's lungs. Moments later, the captain's voice returned, stronger this time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the situation is under control. Please remain seated." A beat. Then applause exploded through the cabin. Not polite clapping, not scattered noise, real applause. The kind that comes from relief so strong it needs somewhere to go. Some people cried openly. Others laughed. A few wiped their eyes quickly, embarrassed by the rush of emotion. The cockpit door opened again. The black man stepped out. Same calm, same quiet strength. The flight attendants looked at him differently now. Everyone did. Gratitude filled the space he walked through. Respect followed him back to his seat like a shadow. He sat down, buckled in, looked forward. The rich passenger didn't say a word. He couldn't, because power had shifted. Not loudly, not with shouting or revenge or humiliation, but completely. And for the first time since boarding, the man who thought he owned the sky understood what it felt like to be grounded. The plane continued on, but nothing inside that cabin would ever be the same. The wheels touched the runway with a solid thud, and the entire cabin breathed out at once. It wasn't loud at first. It was subtle. A release. Shoulders dropping, hands unclenching, lungs finally filling all the way, the kind of exhale people don't realize they've been holding until it escapes them. Then came the sound. Applause. Not polite, not staged, real, raw, grateful. Hands clapped hard. Someone laughed through tears. A woman whispered thank you over and over like a prayer she didn't want to forget. Another passenger bowed their head, eyes closed, lips moving silently. Some people cried openly. Others wiped their faces quickly, embarrassed by how close fear had come. And some people didn't clap at all. They sat still, quiet, avoiding eye contact, staring straight ahead like the moment might pass faster if they didn't acknowledge it. The black engineer sat in his seat, hands resting calmly on his thighs. He didn't smile, he didn't wave, he didn't stand. He simply nodded once as a flight attendant passed, her eyes shining, gratitude written all over her face. Another crew member paused for half a second longer than necessary, offering him a look that said more than words ever could. Respect. Real respect. The kind that isn't demanded. The kind that arrives late, after the truth makes its entrance. The plane slowed as it rolled down the runway. Engines reversed. Brakes hissed. The world outside rushed past the windows again, solid and real, no longer distant and unreachable. The rich passenger stood up too fast. He caught himself on the seat back in front of him, suddenly unsure of his balance. He had been tall before, confident, taking up space like it belonged to him by default. Now he looked smaller. His shoulders were slightly hunched. His jacket sat crooked, forgotten. The watch that once flashed now felt heavy on his wrist, like something weighing him down instead of lifting him up. He stood in the aisle, blocking no one, commanding nothing. I didn't know," he muttered. The words barely carried past his own lips. The black engineer looked up at him. Not with anger, not with pride, not with satisfaction, just honesty. "You didn't ask," he said. That was it. No lecture, no raised voice, no victory speech, just 5 words that landed harder than any insult ever could. The rich man swallowed, hard. His throat worked like he was trying to push something down that refused to stay buried. Around them, the cabin began to stir. Overhead bins opened. Bags slid out. People gathered themselves, still riding the edge of emotion, still shaken in ways they wouldn't fully understand until much later. As the doors opened and fresh air rushed in, passengers filed past the black engineer. One by one, some stopped. "Thank you," a man said, gripping his hand a little too tightly. "You saved us," a woman whispered, tears streaking her face. A teenager nodded at him with wide eyes, like he had just seen a real-life hero for the first time, and didn't quite know what to do with the feeling. Someone called him a hero out loud. The word echoed briefly, then settled. He accepted none of it loudly. He nodded. He met eyes. He let the gratitude pass through him without clinging to it. The rich passenger stayed where he was. He waited. Passengers passed him, too, some without looking, some with glances that lingered just a second longer than before. Not cruel, not triumphant, knowing. When the aisle finally cleared, he stepped forward, slowly, carefully. "I judged you," he said, voice quiet now, stripped of sharp edges, "because I thought money made me superior." The black engineer paused. For a moment, it looked like he might keep walking, like he might let silence do the work. Then he stopped, turned. "Money buys seats," he said softly. "Not worth." The words weren't harsh. They weren't meant to hurt, but they did. Because they were true, the rich man nodded, eyes dropping to the floor. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He didn't try to soften it with excuses. Something inside him had shifted, not snapped, not shattered, cracked. And through that crack, light had found its way in. They stood there for a moment longer. Two men who had shared 30,000 feet of air, fear, and truth. Two lives that would never intersect again. Two paths moving in opposite directions. One walked forward carrying the quiet weight of dignity he had always owned. The other stood still, learning what it meant to earn it. Outside, the terminal buzzed with life. Announcements echoed. Wheels rolled. People hurried toward connections and reunions and ordinary moments that now felt extraordinary simply because they had been given back. The flight didn't just deliver people to a destination. It delivered a lesson. It reminded everyone watching that dignity doesn't need permission to exist, that respect isn't granted by price tags or seats or status, that the people we look down on often hold the world together in ways we never bother to notice, and that the greatest karma isn't punishment, it's clarity. It's being forced to confront the truth when there's nowhere to hide, that the person you dismissed, the person you tried to erase, the person you assumed didn't belong, was the one keeping you alive all along.